Easy peasy. I'm going to turn it back over to Ginger McBride.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction and for having me tonight. Financial aid is kind of an interesting part of the university because I wouldn't be here wearing a W on my jacket if I didn't think that Washburn had a lot of great things to offer. And you know that it is something you probably haven't gone through before as far as doing things like filing the FAFSA, applying for scholarships, deciding what you want to do next and where you want to go. So unless I specify that it's Washburn specific, it's actually pretty general information tonight, just because once again we want you to feel like you have the information you need in order to make informed decisions about what to do next. So some financial aid information in general. We're going to talk about what is financial aid, some of the changes that are going into effect for the 2026 to 2027 academic year. Quick show of hands for our folks who are here in person. Have you had any older siblings who filed the FAFSA, or is this you and your family's first time filling the form out? We're seeing some nods on the second one. Okay, so there may not be changes to you, just changes to me and the school staff who are here tonight. But for you all, it'll be your first time. You won't know any different. We'll talk about how to apply, so how to fill out the FAFSA, and then have some time for question and answers, as well as an opportunity to set up your federal student aid IDs or your studentaid.gov accounts, which you'll use to log in to the federal student aid website and fill out the FAFSA if you're doing it online, which I significantly encourage you to do. Although the paper form is available, the online option is the way to go. So, jumping in with what is financial aid. It's an umbrella term that covers a lot of different types of financial aid, including the ones listed here. So, grants and scholarships are both terms that refer to financial aid you don't need to repay as long as you meet the requirements for it. In my experience, grants tend to be more from a governmental source, whether that's the federal government or the state government, but some really old foundations may also refer to their type of financial aid assistance as grants. We usually hear scholarships more commonly today, so that may be a term you're more familiar with, but those are synonyms that do mean the same thing. We've got a few examples of those types of financial aid. So for example, the federal Pell Grant, the Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, and the Kansas Comprehensive Grant. See how those all have either federal or state in their title, because that's the source of that funding. And the FAFSA is how your eligibility for those is calculated. When it comes to scholarships, a few common examples are merit scholarships. So in this region, there's a high probability that the schools you're looking at, we can use Washburn as an example, will have a freshman merit scholarship program. So depending on maybe your high school GPA and the timeliness of your application to that school, you may automatically be considered for different types of scholarships just based on the work that you put in as a high school student. Washburn's, for example, is just based on your high school GPA and applying to Washburn by March 1st. Others may have either an ACT or an SAT score component. So when it comes to school-specific information, definitely don't hesitate to contact the admissions folks, contact the financial aid department, because, like I said, it's very likely that they may have a merit scholarship program, and learning what you need to do to be eligible for that can literally pay off in the form of financial assistance. Other examples of scholarships that may come from the major that you plan to have or different offices on campus like athletics or music. And then outside scholarships is how we refer to scholarships that aren't coming from the university or the college that you're going to or the state or the federal government. So you may also hear those referred to as third-party payments. But all of those examples are ones that you don't repay as long as you're meeting the requirements to receive those funds. Loans, on the other hand, are a form of financial aid that you are borrowing with the commitment to repaying them. Depending on the type of loan, it may be accruing interest while you're in school, or it may not. For example, the federal subsidized loans are not accruing interest while you're in school and for 6 months after you graduate or drop below half-time. Your eligibility for those are calculated by the FAFSA. Unsubsidized student loans are very similar, except that they are accruing interest while you're in school. Repayment for those begins 6 months after you graduate or drop below half-time as well. And then the Parent Plus Loan Program is an additional type of loan through the federal student aid program that the parents of dependent undergraduate students can apply for in order to help cover some of the costs if they're not already being covered by the student's other financial assistance. And then last but certainly not least, the Federal Work Study Program is something that your eligibility, and at the risk of sounding like a broken record, I'm going to say it again, your eligibility for Federal Work Study is calculated by the FAFSA and your information from the FAFSA, but unlike granting scholarships or student loans, Federal Work Study are funds that you earn by working in typically an on-campus employment opportunity. And so there's an advantage for different offices on campus to participate in the Federal Work Study program, and advantages for you as students, especially that first year, first semester, getting acclimated to a new campus community, getting connected to different offices on campus, and being able to earn money where you're going to school without having too far of a commute or having to schedule time off for things like winter break when the school is already closed. I sort of talked about this when I was going over each type of financial aid, but in case it's helpful to hear again, we've got federal types of financial aid, state types of financial aid, institutional or school-specific types of financial aid, and non-institutional or third-party or outside financial aid. Got those examples again here for you. And since I've already mentioned it about 12 times in the last 5 or so minutes, you may be wondering, what is the FAFSA? That's an abbreviation that stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid, and it's how students apply for different types of financial aid like the ones we just discussed. It's a form that you fill out annually, so as we'll see in a couple slides from now, the FAFSA for your freshman year recently became available, and so you'll fill that out as high school seniors to determine your financial aid eligibility for your freshman year of college, and then in the fall of your freshman year, you'll fill it out for your sophomore year, fall of your sophomore year for your junior year. Every year that you're applying for financial aid, you'll fill out the FAFSA. And it's a requirement for all types of federal financial aid. Some states' scholarship programs or grant programs will also require the FAFSA, so the Kansas Comprehensive Grant, for example, that requires the FAFSA. As a matter of fact, all of the grants and scholarships through KBOR require the FAFSA. Their tuition waivers do not, but you'd be surprised at how many families don't fill out the FAFSA because they think they won't be eligible for anything, and then it turns out they are. Doesn't mean everyone who fills it out will be eligible for the maximum amount of grants and scholarships, but year after year reports come out about the number of students and their families who don't fill it out, and then based on other data that's available, it could have made a big difference in their ability to fund their first year of college, for example. And then for my folks who are in Shawnee County, our Shawnee County scholarships programs do require the FAFSA. So some types of institutional or school-specific financial aid may also require the FAFSA. And if you aren't sure, definitely reach out to the schools that you're interested to figure out, should I file the FAFSA? I'm going to guess that they're going to say yes, but that'll be a more in-depth opportunity for you to talk to them about the scholarships that they offer in your individual circumstances. Happy to talk to you this afternoon, or excuse me, this evening about Washburn-specific stuff, but as part of, once again, getting an informed sort of picture of the financial aid that's available to you at each of the schools you may be considering, definitely recommend starting those conversations early so you don't miss out on any deadlines or application processes that may be coming up throughout your senior year. And I know I mentioned that it calculates your eligibility that then we use to determine what types of financial aid you can receive. The score that the FAFSA calculates is called the Student Aid Index, or the SAI. And that's not a dollar amount. It's also not like the amount of funding that you're receiving or the amount you have to pay, but it's a score that financial aid offices use to interpret your eligibility for different types of financial aid based on all the information you provide through the FAFSA. Like I mentioned, there have been some changes. I'm very excited about some of them. For example, families no longer have to include the net worth of family-owned businesses with 100 or fewer full-time or full-time equivalent employees. Same goes for farms on which a family resides. Those are really significant factors for a lot of the families and students that we work with here in Kansas. A little less relevant are family-owned fishing businesses, but depending on where you're watching the live stream from, maybe that applies to you. So, we're excited to see that those are no longer being considered as far as the student aid index calculation. One of the other exciting factors, and we mentioned this a little bit already, is your federal student aid ID or your studentaid.gov account. That is no longer going to require 1 to 3 days to verify before you're able to use it to complete the FAFSA. So they're calling it real-time verification, and essentially when you create your account, it's verifying it with the Social Security Administration and any other databases that check goes through, sort of right here, right now, or right there, right then, but without the 1 to 3 day delay in order for those accounts to be verified. A few other changes are related to eligibility for the Pell Grant, depending on what your student aid index is calculated at. Changes to annual and lifetime loan limits, as well as the amount that you can borrow based on your enrollment in each semester. So if you're planning on being a full-time student, that won't look any different for you, but if you're not planning on being enrolled full-time, then that could wind up affecting the amount of not only loans that you could be eligible for. Some scholarships or grants will require you to be a full-time student, but one of the differences going into next year is that loans can be prorated based on your enrollment, if you're enrolled below or less than full-time. And then changes to loan repayment and the elimination of the Graduate Plus Loan Program. So I know that talking about loan repayment 6 months after you graduate or drop below halftime, we're already projecting 4 to 5 years into the future. Graduate loan programs, we're projecting even further into the future if that's part of your college and career plan. So know that there may be some differences as far as the financial aid offices that you're talking to, but especially if you're doing this for the first time, it won't be a change for you. So don't hesitate to ask any questions, but I won't belabor this point since based on the sort of surface level poll earlier, it seems like we're all coming to this pretty fresh. I mentioned this earlier, very exciting changes for our area. And if you have a family-owned business with 100 or fewer employees, a farm on which the family resides, or a commercial fishing business owned by your family, you will not report those assets onto FAFSA. As far as how you apply, the 2026 to 2027 FAFSA was originally scheduled to come out today. It actually came out a little bit early this year. It came out last Wednesday. You can fill it out at studentaid.gov. And sometimes people want to know, okay, you just told me when it comes out or that it's available now. When is the FAFSA due? And that is where we get into a school-specific priority date is probably how you'll hear it referred to. Washburn's priority date for the 2026 to 2027 FAFSA is March 1st, 2026. So by completing the FAFSA by a school's priority date, you're including yourself in the first group of students when they're reviewing eligibility for limited types of financial aid. So the Kansas Comprehensive Grant I mentioned earlier, that's a good example. The state does not provide enough of that grant funding for every student who could be eligible to receive that. And they leave it up to the schools to say, okay, you need to figure out who you're going to give it to. And it's not quite first come, first served, because if one of you filled it out last week and one of you fills it out tomorrow, as long as you filled it out and had it sent to schools by their priority date, you'll be considered equally in that first group of students. And then in my experience, if there's funding after they've reviewed everyone's eligibility in that first group, then it'll sort of be more first come, first served based on the date that the FAFSA was filed. So if you're looking at a school and realize, their FAFSA priority date already passed, don't let that stop you from filling it out. But if you're planning ahead, recommend making a list of each of the schools that you're interested in and their priority dates for the FAFSA, then just treat whichever one is earliest, like your personal deadline to file the FAFSA, because you can include up to 20 schools on your FAFSA, and it'll all get sent to them at the same time. If you're thinking about more than 20 schools, don't worry, you can edit the list of schools. Maybe you're going through your first 20 and realize, oh, I'm not interested in that school after all. You can add another school in there. But I'll leave those kind of conversations to your college readiness counselors. 'Cause going through it as a senior in high school myself, I was kind of drowning in details after about 8. So when they said, we've expanded the number to 20, I was like, all right, I'm sure there's somebody out there who's really excited. There are 20 options now. But like I said, you can edit the list even after you've submitted the FAFSA. So just take a look at any of the schools you're interested in and what their priority dates are, so you know you're getting your FAFSA done by then. Another question we get a lot is, do I have to include parent information on the FAFSA? And the way the FAFSA determines whether you as a student need to include parent information on the FAFSA is based on a series of criteria, including things like whether or not you're 24, if you are married, if you have any circumstances like if you were in a legal guardianship or in, I should say, legal guardianship as determined by a court in the state. So legal custody doesn't quite count for this process, but if it was legal guardianship as determined by a court in your state of residence, aka Kansas, then you would put yes to that section of these student circumstances. If none of the criteria apply to you, it'll ask if you have any sort of mitigating or unusual circumstances that prevent you from having contact with your parents and therefore putting their information on your FAFSA. But if none of that is the case, then you'll be expected to invite your parent to provide their information on your FAFSA, regardless of whether or not they're helping you pay for school. So you may see it listed as a contributor invite, not because they're promising to contribute financially, but because they're providing their information so you can complete your FAFSA as someone who's being considered dependent for FAFSA filing purposes. After it tells you whether or not you're being considered dependent or independent for FAFSA filing purposes, if you are considered dependent, it'll give you the option to apply for an unsubsidized loan only. However, I want to emphasize the word only, because if you say yes to that question, that is the only type of financial aid you'll be able to receive from the FAFSA and from other programs that may require you to have the FAFSA on file. Fortunately, when you're filling out the FAFSA, it defaults to no. So you'd have to go in and change the answer in order to say yes. There are a few people every year who still do that by accident. At Washburn, we give you a phone call, we send you an email, we say, hey, is that the answer you meant to select? And if it's not, we can help you undo that so you can invite your parent to the FAFSA after all. But especially when they introduced that question 2 years ago, it was a double negative and there was a lot of confusion. So I want to assure you it will default to no. You have to change it to yes in order to say, apply for an unsubsidized loan only. If you're wondering who my parent would be on the FAFSA, got a little flow chart here for you from the Federal Student Aid website. That font is very small up there, but I look at this, I won't say all the time, but frequently. The first question is, are your parents married? If the answer is yes, that's who's going on the FAFSA. Pretty straightforward. Second column is, okay, my parents aren't married. Do your parents live together? If the answer is yes, you also know who's going on the FAFSA, because it's those parents. If your parents are not married or living together, it's going to ask you whether either of your parents provided more support over the last 12 months. If the answer is yes, that person would be your parent for FAFSA filing purposes. If that parent is married to someone else, that person will also be on your FAFSA for FAFSA filing purposes. If the answer to did either of your parents provide more than 50% of support to you over the last 12 months? If the answer to that is no, if it's truly 50-50, it defaults to whichever parent made more in this year's FAFSA. It's going off of 2024 income and tax information. So whoever made more, that's your parent for FAFSA filing purposes, and if they're married, that person is also on your FAFSA. I was about to say any questions, but I realize these family circumstances can be a little sensitive, so feel free to see me after if you have any questions about who's my parent for FAFSA filing purposes. Now that we know whether you have to have a parent on the FAFSA and who that parent or parents would be, the other thing that I said I was so excited about earlier was the ability to invite parents to the FAFSA through this super simplified process. Last couple of years, you may have heard, it's kind of a headache. You had to have a parent's full name, date of birth, social security number, address if they didn't have a social security number, and the information the student typed in had to match their parents' information exactly. I mean, if your name is Michael, but you go by Mike, it has to say Michael, and if your address is 1221 Southwest Chestnut Street, period, you have to have the period. It was very finicky, very frustrating, and there is nothing more cringe-inducing for me as a financial aid advisor than when we get to that section of the FAFSA, and without any kind of context whatsoever, a student picks up the phone, "What's your social security number?" is the question they just asked mom. I'm like, whoa, 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 you at least have to tell her you're talking to me, and we're filling out your FAFSA, otherwise that is very sensitive information to just be asking about on a random Tuesday at 11 a.m. But now, you just need an email address. And when you put in that email address, it'll send a code that your parent can use to log into the FAFSA, and it will know this parent belongs to this student. I lied, if any of you students are married, this is also the process for inviting your spouse to put their information on your FAFSA. Because although that would make you independent from your parents for FAFSA filing purposes, we still need that spouse's information on your form. Sometimes when it gets to the marital question, some students go, "I'm single." And other times they go, "Oh, I'm single and it's gonna stay that way." So lots of funny reactions from people when they get to the marital status question, but that's one of the reasons why it's asking you that. As far as your FSA IDs, which stands for Federal Student Aid Identification, it's also referred to as your studentaid.gov account. I think that helps people figure out what it is a little more clearly, because it's your username and password for the Federal Student Aid website, which once again is studentaid.gov. As a student, you will need one to fill out your FAFSA online. And then anyone who's identified as your parent will need one. If that parent is married, and if those married people filed taxes jointly in 2024, only one of them should need an account and should need to fill out the parent section of the FAFSA on your behalf. If your parent got married to someone, say, in 2025, they would each need an account to log in and provide their consent for the IRS to transfer their income and tax information from 2024. So if you filed taxes jointly in 2024, congratulations, you are one tax entity according to the IRS. If you didn't, it'll just be an extra 5 minutes for whoever your spouse is to add their information to the form as well. Once again, there's no more 1 to 3 day delay. We're being told it's real-time processing. And we still recommend setting it up early because although it's an exciting change, better safe than sorry. You can do that through the FAFSA website or studentaid.gov. It's almost like I knew what was coming because I just mentioned the IRS consent piece. One of the ways they simplified the FAFSA from about 108 questions down to 38 questions is by partnering with the IRS and providing a bunch of security protocols to make sure that the information coming from the IRS is not only secure, I mean like hyper secure. And so in order for the IRS to share your income and tax information with the Department of Education for FAFSA filing purposes. You need to use your studentaid.gov account in order to provide consent for the IRS to share that information. Consent makes it sound like there's a choice, and technically there is. You can choose not to provide your consent, but then your FAFSA won't actually be able to fully calculate what it needs to. And say you send it to Washburn, we'll get that, we'll pick up the phone, we'll send you an email letting you know the steps to provide that consent in order for your financial aid eligibility to be fully processed. Another thing we like to mention as we get to the end of our time together is that if your financial circumstances don't look the same as they did in 2024, there is a process that you can go through with any schools that you're interested in receiving a financial aid offer from in order to update your financial aid, or excuse me, in order to update your financial information from 2024 to, in this case most likely, 2025, as we sort of head into the final months of the year here. That's called a special circumstances process. It's essentially saying, hey, we got a snapshot of 2024 and 2025 looks a whole lot different. So in order to make sure that schools are giving you financial aid information based on the most up-to-date student finances, family finances, that is an option if the 2024 snapshot is no longer an accurate representation. Just to recap, a few tips that we've talked about so far and a few we haven't. You want to set up your studentaid.gov account early. Check out the priority dates for any schools that you're interested in attending. Have access to your 2024 tax information, although it's going to pull a majority of the information it needs from your tax returns. There are still a few questions it's going to ask you where you may benefit from having that wage and income information easy to access. If you're filling out the form and you're starting to feel a little stuck, know that there are these information icons available throughout the form. I would say if you hover over them, if you click on them or tap on them, 70% of the time, very helpful information. 30% of the time, I read the information, I'm like, you just reworded the sentence, I'm still confused. That doesn't happen to me anymore because I fill out hundreds of FAFSAs every year. And I'd be more than happy to help you fill out yours. So please don't hesitate to reach out to me or any of my other friendly neighborhood financial aid advisors at Washburn. We've also got great colleagues at schools across the state and across state lines whose whole job is to help you get the information you need to decide what you're doing next. And we know the FAFSA is a big part of that. So please complete the FAFSA early. Just because Washburn's priority date is March 1st doesn't mean you should wait until then to get it done, especially because it's available now. Some final tips are apply for admission to the schools that you're interested in going to. Some of them may be able to just hold on to your FAFSA until you eventually apply. Washburn, we kind of do that, but we also reach out to you to say, hey, you need to apply. And so if you get a piece of letter mail from us and you think, oh, my financial aid offer is here, and you open it up to get a letter that says you're currently ineligible for financial aid because we don't know who you are, you haven't applied to Washburn, our friendly neighborhood admissions representatives would also be happy to help you get that done. But it's one less sort of bump in the process of getting you your financial aid information if you've already applied to the school. Others may expect you to have applied already, and others will be able to just process it no problem while they wait for you to apply. But getting your applications helps match up who you are with the FAFSA when you turn that in or when you have that submitted. Similar to making a list of the priority dates for any schools that you're interested in attending, making a list of different scholarships and the deadlines for those, if you haven't already started doing that. A lot of scholarship opportunities are planning a year in advance, so even though you may feel like we're barely halfway through the first semester of my senior year, it does not hurt to mark down in your calendar or in a spreadsheet what those dates are, whether they're December or in the spring or over the summer, just so that way you don't miss them and wake up for new student orientation and realize, oh, that deadline was last week. once you've applied to a school and either filled out your FAFSA or turned in a scholarship application, or in the case of our merit scholarships at Washburn, all we need is that Washburn application. We'll reach out to you to let you know what your financial aid offer consists of at that time. The way we do it is we send a piece of letter mail to the address that we have on file for you, because we know you might not be logged in and looking at your Washburn account information just yet. You'll still be able to access your financial aid information through your Washburn account, but just in case not everyone is on top of things, as the fine folks in the auditorium tonight and on our live stream, we send you that piece of letter mail to let you know, and then you can always log in to review that information. Other schools may send you an email to whatever email address you use to review, or use to apply to their school. So we recommend keeping a list on your mailbox and your inbox. That's also how we'll let you know if any additional information is required. So maybe that application to Washburn, or if we need to verify any of the information from your FAFSA, we'll be in touch. And then as you're receiving financial aid offers, make sure that you're understanding sort of what the information is based on. So whether tuition is consistent, whether you're taking 12 or 16 credit hours, or if the cost of tuition varies based on the number of credit hours that you're taking. When you get your financial aid information, it'll also include estimated costs. And those may seem like comparing apples to one another, but as you're sort of reading through the letter, it'll have little details that are important to keep track of, and that'll really help you avoid comparing apples to oranges. I'm going to sound like a broken record again when I say this, but if you have questions as you're going through this process, whether it's applying for scholarships, submitting the FAFSA, reviewing your financial aid offers, please don't hesitate to reach out. I've got some contact information here for the financial aid office where I work, as well as our friends in admissions at Washburn. And we'll open it up for some Q&A if anybody's got any questions they want to ask in front of the big group. But if you don't have any questions you want to ask in front of everybody, I'll be around a little bit afterwards to talk one-on-one. Thank you, Name Twin.
The other thing I was going to say for folks that are here, two of the sheets that we gave you as you walked in, one is this little handy dandy FAFSA checklist. This is one of those things, like, it's helpful to have with you as you're filling out this process, because there's like a little spot where you write down what emails you use. So next year, if you're doing this again and you're like, I don't remember my passwords, and I don't remember my accounts, it's all in this one sheet for you. And it guides you step by step of everything that you need required information-wise, and then it asks you the questions that you already need to know, like, as you're going through the process. So this is a nice little cheat sheet. The other thing that I gave you are the step-by-step directions on how to make an FSA ID. You guys can make this tonight and have it, and then you should be ready to go to log in to your FAFSA application. So it's easy peasy, all right there. But I would just say these are two helpful documents. For my kids, I don't know if Mrs. Martin is doing this or not either, but on Monday and Tuesday of next week, our seniors are going to be participating in Apply Kansas. This is where they'll have a quick 15, 20-minute meeting with me, and we'll talk about what they're interested in next year, whether that's post-secondary institution or workforce. For Apply Kansas, the days, the Board of Regent Schools, Community College, Washburn, they are free to apply, so they waive their application fees. So it's really great if you're on the fence, like, oh, I don't know, I've been thinking Washburn or ESU, go ahead and apply to both of them, and we will help you. The only thing that you may need access to that we may not have, sometimes they might need your social security number, sometimes I have that on PowerSchool information, but you guys actually, I sent it out tonight, the sign-up sheet. So you guys, there's a sheet, you make an appointment to meet with me or Mrs. Steele, we give you support, help to get those applications in. It's typically kind of a fun day, and you feel accomplished by the end of it. So, what other questions do you have for us? Anything for Ginger or I? This process can be a little bit overwhelming. It's, I don't know, intimidating at first. If you run into any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to the institution in which you really think you're going to go, whether that's Washburn, K-State, wherever. Their folks are fantastic and are really helpful and great for for tech support.
I'll tell you a secret that I probably shouldn't say because it's being live streamed, but it's not that deep. Unlike admissions, where they work with new students like each year, and then the juniors will be applying next year, and 3 years from now the sophomores will be applying. As a financial aid advisor, I work with everybody, whether you're a brand new student or a continuing student. And one of the reasons that really works for me is because everybody has different questions based on their circumstances and their family situations, but we're in like the 7th week of this semester. We answered a lot of questions about current student situations. So all of a sudden my phone's ringing or my email's blowing up with new student questions. I'm like, it's so exciting. I have the same thing happen after the end of new student orientation. I'm like, where are the continuing students? I've just answered a lot of questions for new students, but I'm like so excited to be here with you all tonight. I'm excited to help demystify this process as much as possible for you, especially when it comes to starting early. I know financial aid is not the fun part of going to school, but it is an important part unless you are planning on writing a giant check, in which case, let me know if you want to adopt a 32-year-old financial aid advisor. But no, it really is lots of details to keep track of, but if we can help you with that in any way, please don't hesitate to let us know.
The other blurb I was going to say, and Ginger you sent out the original email, so you're going to know the info to this. I sent out an email to folks when we were talking about this night. The organization that you're a part of has a free virtual online support that I'll let Ginger talk about real quick too.
So in addition to being, and this is as of today I am the Assistant Director of Financial Aid Advising.
Yes.
So yes, before that, I've been a financial aid advisor, I've been a financial aid counselor. So I've got this new title today, and in addition to my work at Washburn, I volunteer on our state financial aid Professionals Association Committee. It's CASPA, Kansas Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators. And we know that there are some parts of the state where people have lots of schools all in the area, and there may be fantastic folks in their high schools or their local colleges who are offering financial aid or FAFSA assistance. But that isn't true for everybody, or what if you're busy on the night that your school's doing a FAFSA help event? So each month, starting in October, I think it's October, November, February, and March, there will be a digital option for families and students from across the state to log into a Zoom room. You'll probably see me or one of my fellow committee members, and we'll get you assigned to a Zoom room, just you and your family, if your family is joining you. You'll meet essentially one-on-one privately with one of the financial aid administrators from across the state. So if it's like 5:30 and you're like, oh no, we missed the day at St. Mary's, or we missed the day at Rossville, don't worry, there's still financial aid help available. And my normal business hours are 8 to 5, so you don't have to wait for virtual help nights. We can schedule a Zoom meeting, we can talk over the phone, you can come visit me at Washburn. Apply Kansas Days, great initiative across the state. Washburn's application is always free, so I think admissions would not be very happy with me if I didn't mention that, but whether you're talking to me or admissions, we pass new students back all the time depending on what their questions are, and so I promise this will be the last time I say it tonight, but please don't hesitate to let us know if you end up having any questions as you're going through these processes.
Awesome. Any other questions for the good of the cause? And feel free, if you have something specific to ask Ginger, come on down and ask away. Awesome. Have a great night. Thank you all for coming. We appreciate it.